Ma'am, step aside. First-class boarding is not for misunderstandings, Captain Ron Mercer said, his voice low enough to sound polite, loud enough to sting. I heard the announcement, Captain, the woman replied calmly. My ticket's correct. Let me guess, he said. Someone printed it wrong for you. A hush spread through Gate C-18 of Dallas, Fort Worth Airport. The late morning sun poured through the tall windows, glinting off the captain's silver wings. People stopped scrolling their phones. A child tugged at her mother's sleeve. Even the steady hum of the air conditioning seemed to wait for the woman's response. Her name was Dana Caldwell. Mid-50s. Neat navy suit. Carry-on bag resting at her feet. Not a tremor in her hands, though the pilot's tone had been sharp enough to rattle anyone. One gate agent shifted uneasily. Captain Mercer, she whispered. Her boarding pass scans correctly. He raised a hand. Kim, please. I've flown 30 years. I know a bad print when I see one. Dana held out her ticket again, steady as a metronome. I assure you it's valid. Ma'am, I'm trying to help you, Ron said. This cabin is reserved for our top-tier passengers. People who fly often. People who. He caught himself, but too late. The implication sat heavy in the air. Dana didn't flinch. She met his eyes with a quiet steadiness that made several travelers look down, embarrassed for him. A man in the line behind her stepped forward. Sir, I travel for work every week. That looks like a normal first-class ticket. Ron ignored him. I'll walk you to customer service myself, he insisted. We'll get this sorted. Dana's calm didn't budge. Captain Mercer, I'm boarding this flight. On time. To Chicago. He exhaled with dramatic patience, then reached for her bag, uninvited, trying to pull it from her hand. She tightened her grip. Please don't touch my belongings, she said, voice still even. A few gasps spread through the gate area. Someone pulled out a phone, not filming, just hovering in indecision. The gate agent's cheeks flushed. Captain, the agent tried again. We're delaying Zone A. Ron's tone sharpened. Kim, the last thing we need is a security issue because someone thinks she deserves an upgrade she didn't earn. Dana lifted her chin a fraction. I didn't request an upgrade. Right, he muttered. Of course you didn't. She opened her wallet and produced a small leather card holder. Not a badge, not an ID, just something that caught the light. A simple silver-edged pass. She didn't offer it for him to take. She simply let it rest on her palm, angled in the morning sun. Ron blinked. His confidence flickered, then returned. Whatever card that is, it doesn't change seating procedures. Dana closed the holder and tucked it away. I didn't show it to change procedures. I showed it because you seem determined not to see what's in front of you. A ripple of whispers crossed the gate area. What does she mean? Who is she? Captain looks nervous. Dana lifted her boarding pass once more. One last time, Captain Mercer. You may scan it again. Her voice remained soft, but something in it carried an authority that didn't come from volume. It made the gate agent swallow hard. It made several travelers straighten. It made Ron hesitate. He reached for the pass, slower this time, the certainty in his hand replaced by something else, something unsettled. But before he could take it, a chime sounded from the gate desk. The agent looked at her monitor, eyes widening with recognition. Captain, this passenger is... She stopped, glanced at Dana, then back at the screen. Sir, you need to let her board. Ron frowned. What? What are you seeing? The agent's breathing hitched. It lists her as... Dana gently placed a hand on the desk. It's all right, Kim. He'll find out soon. Ron stiffened. Find out what? Dana stepped past him with quiet confidence, her bag rolling smoothly beside her, her footsteps measured, unhurried. As she reached the jet bridge entrance, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. Captain Mercer, she said. We'll finish this conversation once we're airborne. A murmur swept through the gate, travelers leaning to see the woman who had just stood her ground with such calm precision. Ron felt the eyes on him, waiting, weighing, wondering what he had just walked into. And he had no idea, none at all, how much power she truly held. Enjoying this? Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story. The announcement board glowed coldly. DFW, Gate C14, Skyward 317 on time. A thin winter light cut across the concourse, catching dust motes like a slow snowfall. People moved in small orbits, business travelers with rolling bags, a mother with a toddler, a man in a cardigan reading a paperback. The airport smelled of coffee and heated vinyl. Evelyn Carter stood by the window, palms folded around a paper cup that had long gone lukewarm. She was 48, deliberate in the way she held herself, the kind of stillness that had been earned by years of proving competence where others expected excuses. Her suit was plain navy. Her silver hair was pulled back in a precise knot. Around her neck hung an ID lanyard she had not yet used. Skyward, Senior Vice President, Operations. The plastic badge caught the light and threw a small square onto her palm. She watched crews stream past the concourse doors, flight attendants in their served-up jackets, a line of pilots in dark coats, caps under their arms. Evelyn's hands tightened once, twice, then loosened. This was her first day in a role that would require her to stand at the center of 100 small, institutional resistances, schedules, seniority rules, union expectations, legacy practices that shaped how men and women, young and old, were seen and heard. A voice at her shoulder broke the hum of the terminal. "You here to board?" the man asked. He was tall, weathered brown leather around his eyes, a pilot's gait, shoulders broad, chin slightly up. Captain James Holloway, if the union notices were right, 57, decades at the yoke. He had the kind of smile that suggested he had been allowed to keep his opinions in public for a long time. Evelyn turned. She kept her voice measured. "No, I'm meeting a crew," she said. "I'm Evelyn Carter. I'm with Skyward." The man's smile thinned into a polite, puzzled tilt. "Skyward's new. What did you say?" The press release said someone was moving in from corporate. Thought that was more of a desk job. "You're operations." "Yes," she said. "Senior Vice President, Operations. I'm overseeing crew operations starting today." He let out a short laugh, not unkind, but coated in disbelief. "Right? Must be nice. Modern corporate. Pretty young for that boardroom, aren't you?" Evelyn felt the air press against her ribs the way it did when turbulence hit at mid-altitude, instinctive tightening. She kept her face neutral. "I'm 48, she said. "I've worked in scheduling and safety for 24 years. I've been a pilot liaison, dispatcher, and I've written the operational protocols you put in your flight manuals. I don't expect you to know all that." The laugh turned thin. Holloway's hand brushed his cap, a habitual gesture. Around them, the terminal noise folded into their corners. A child's delighted squeal, an overhead announcement about gate changes, the soft click of a coffee machine. "You're new to the line," he said. "That's all I meant." "No harm. No harm taken," Evelyn said. Her voice did not rise. But inside, a map of the day redrew itself. Meetings that would no longer be private, the budget report she needed to present that afternoon, the union liaison who expected FaceTime. Each item sat like a pebble in her pocket. She set the cup down on a low bench and smoothed the front of her jacket. Her phone buzzed once in her purse. The lock screen showed a single message from Malik Reed, her chief of staff, arriving IN 10. "Ready for meet?" She thumbed a reply at gate. "Stay neutral." He sent a thumbs up. Holloway watched her reply, either uninterested or unaware of the handshake of staff and executive she had just completed. He sighed and tapped the brim of his cap with the index finger, the small ritualized click of a man who expected ritual to be enough. "Look," he said finally, lowering his voice so that only the people closest could hear, "I've been flying Skyward for 30 years. We don't need somebody from corporate telling us how to keep planes in the air. We've been doing fine." There it was, the claim many in authority made when faced with change. Tradition dressed as competence. The words landed not as accusation, but as assumption. An assumption that the men who had flown longer knew more than the woman whose job now required she measure their work against new standards. Evelyn's fingers found the edge of her badge until the square of plastic cut a small white line into her palm. She forced a smile that was small and civil. "I'm not here to take anyone's logbook," she said. "I'm here to listen and to make sure the company keeps its promise to the crews and to the people who fly with us. We'll be asking for input." Holloway's jaw worked. "Input," he echoed. "That's one way to say it." Around them, a gate agent called for Skyward 317 boarding. The crowd shifted. A flight attendant carrying a cart wove through the passengers, the squeak of trolley wheels like a metronome in the background. Before Holloway could answer, Malik's arrival materialized, a man in his mid-30s in a charcoal coat, his face all business, hand extended in greeting. "Evelyn," he said, brisk and ready, "boardroom's been moved." The union rep can't make noon. There's an issue on 204. We have to pivot. Evelyn glanced toward Holloway. His expression had lost the open-mouthed smirk. It had gone flat and watchful. We'll adjust, she said. Then to Holloway, she added, if you have time later, I'd appreciate a quick sit-down. I want to hear from the line. He nodded once, the kind of curt, professional nod that can mean both agreement and a promise to resist. He lifted his cap and moved toward gate C-14 where other captains gathered, their laughter small and private. Evelyn tucked her badge back under her jacket as if hiding it, though it was not a secret. The small white square of light from the badge's corner stayed her mind like a steady tick. She had a list of items that could not be pushed aside: safety audits, fatigue scheduling, fairness and reserve assignments. Each one would touch pilots' routines, and men like Captain Holloway would notice. Her watch read 11:56 a.m., November 23, 2025. In 64 minutes, she would stand before a room of managers and union representatives and outline her plan. In that hour, she had to collect herself, marshal facts, and brace for the obvious. Skepticism would be polite, and resistance would not be kind. She stepped away from the window and felt the concourse shift under her shoes. An invisible draft, the world moving around the small authority she held and the larger one she would have to claim. Then, from the cluster by gate C-14, Holloway looked back at her and smiled the same small, knowing smile. Evelyn answered with a calm she did not entirely feel. The late-morning bustle of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport pressed in from every direction, wool bags rattling, gate announcements echoing off high ceilings, the faint aroma of coffee drifting from a kiosk down hall. Yet all that noise seemed to fall away around Grace Coleman, as if the terminal had narrowed to a single corridor where she walked alone. She kept her shoulders square, chin lifted, notes tucked neatly in her leather folio. Her mind replayed the pilot's tone from earlier, flat, cold, dismissive, not loud, but sharp enough to leave a mark. She hated that it stung. 54 years old, decades of aviation management behind her, and still an offhand comment could make her pulse quicken. She exhaled slowly, letting the breath steady her. This wasn't the first time someone underestimated her. It likely wouldn't be the last. But she had learned long ago that she didn't need to meet disrespect with heat. She just needed to keep walking. A rolling suitcase clipped the edge of her heel. "Sorry, ma'am, didn't see you there," a young traveler said, flushed. "It's all right," Grace answered gently, offering him a small nod before continuing toward the operations wing. Every few steps, the same thought flickered back. He spoke to me like I was an inconvenience. She didn't even know the pilot's full name, just Captain Porter from the stitched patch on his uniform. But she heard the impatience behind his words when she tried to verify crew readiness. She saw the little lift of his eyebrow when he looked her up and down. She shook it off. She had a meeting to prepare for, paperwork to review, a transition plan to finalize. At the corner security checkpoint, Marcus Hale, a ground operations supervisor, caught up to her with a quick stride. "Morning, Grace," he said, tapping his badge against the sensor. "You all right? You looked a little distant earlier." Grace offered a calm smile. "Just thinking through the schedule. We have a lot shifting this week." Marcus studied her face for a moment. He'd worked beside her for 10 years. He could read more than she liked to admit. "Whatever happened at Gate C-12, he said softly, "don't carry it on your back. You're tougher than half the people in this place combined." Grace chuckled. "I appreciate the pep talk." They walked through the restricted hallway, passing framed photographs of retired aircraft, each one polished beneath soft overhead lights. Grace paused at the image of an old twin-engine plane, the kind she used to ride as a junior inspector. She raised her hand and quietly traced the outline in the air, remembering long nights, clipped reports, fixing problems others overlooked. "It's a good day," she murmured to herself. "A lot is changing. Good is coming." Marcus tilted his head. "You sound like you're up to something." Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a message from headquarters. She scanned it quickly, then held the phone a little tighter. Marcus noticed. "Everything all right?" he asked. "More than all right," she replied, though she didn't explain. "Not yet." There were procedures to follow, and she wanted the timing to be right. But a quiet warmth spread across her chest. Soon enough, the work of the past year, every late-night call, every careful policy revision would show its fruit. They turned into the operations conference room. The long glass table gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights. A projector hummed faintly. Stacks of reports sat arranged with crisp precision. Grace set her folio down at the head of the table. Marcus blinked. "You're sitting there today?" Grace gave him a knowing smile. "Temporary for now. Final confirmation comes this afternoon." Before Marcus could respond, a knock sounded at the open doorway. Captain Porter stepped inside. The same uniform. The same clipped posture. But now his expression shifted when he saw her sitting at the head of the table. First confusion, then something close to irritation, quickly masked by a professional smile. "Operations requested I join this briefing," he said, directing the line not to her, but past her toward Marcus. Grace folded her hands. "Yes, Captain. Please take a seat. We'll begin shortly." He hesitated a fraction too long before sitting. The wheels of his chair squeaked as he pulled it back. Just a small sound, but in the quiet room, it punctured the air. Grace watched him out of the corner of her eye as she organized her notes. He didn't look at her directly. His jaw shifted once, twice, as if he were bracing for an annoyance rather than preparing for a professional discussion. A soft chime sounded from the projector. The agenda appeared on the screen. Marcus leaned closer to her and whispered, "You sure you want him here for this? You know how he is." Grace's voice stayed steady. "He needs to be here, Marcus. Some things need to be heard firsthand." Outside, a jet roared down the runway, the vibration trembling through the floor. Grace felt the sensation rise up her spine, not fear, but anticipation. This was the moment before the ground shifted. And Captain Porter had no idea what was coming. The afternoon sun pressed through the wide windows of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, laying long stripes of gold across the polished floor. Passengers hurried past the gate area, rolling suitcases clicking in a steady rhythm. That sound underlined the tension building around Gate C-27, where Captain David Langford stood stiffly, arms crossed, jaw set. Across from him, Dr. Renee Hall, calm and composed in a navy blazer, remained seated with her carry-on beside her feet. She didn't flinch under his sharp glance. If anything, she looked more centered now, as if quiet had become her shield. A few nearby travelers watched with uncertain interest. They had already witnessed David's dismissive tone earlier. Most didn't know the full story. They only sensed the wrongness of a man in uniform talking down to a woman who had spoken with such measured dignity. The soft hum of an overhead vent settled into the background, steady, constant, almost comforting. "Ma'am," David said, voice clipped, "the crew briefing is for authorized personnel only." "You didn't need to interrupt." Renee lifted her eyes. "I asked a question, Captain. A simple question about the updated safety procedure." His jaw tightened. "And I answered that we've been doing this for years. There's nothing new to explain." A gate attendant approached, sensing the strain. "Everything all right here?" Renee offered the attendant a polite nod. "Yes, thank you, Mia. We were just discussing procedure." David shot a look at the attendant, then back at Renee, surprised that she knew airport staff by name. Mia hesitated, then stepped back to her counter, glancing over her shoulder with unease. A soft ding sounded from the overhead speakers. "Pre-boarding will begin shortly for Flight 482 to Charlotte." The announcement seemed to push the tension into a tighter coil. Renee rose, smoothing her blazer. "Captain, no one here is trying to make your job harder." "That's not what it feels like," he replied. "You questioned me in front of passengers." "I asked for clarity," she said, calmly, respectfully, the way any professional should. Several passengers exchanged glances. One man whispered to another, though the words were lost under the rolling echo of suitcase wheels. David took a breath, trying to steady himself. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not by someone whose role he couldn't quite place. She wasn't crew. She wasn't management. She was something else. But he couldn't admit uncertainty, not here, not now. "Look," he said, lowering his volume a notch, "I take safety seriously. I run a tight cockpit. I don't need anyone second-guessing me about things I already know." Renee studied him for a long moment. Her gaze didn't accuse, it evaluated, as though she was gathering information rather than defending herself. "David," she said gently, "no one's asking you to loosen your standards." He stiffened. "Captain Langford." Another micro-silence fell between them. The hum of the vent seemed louder now, pressing into the small gap of space. Captain Langford, she repeated, matching his tone but not his edge. Respect is a two-way street. You spoke to me as if I were an inconvenience. You approached me while I was preparing for a flight, he countered. There's a chain of command, and you assumed I wasn't part of it. A small slip of awareness flickered across his face, but he pushed it down. I assumed nothing. I simply set boundaries. Renee opened her carry-on and retrieved a slim leather folder. She didn't open it. She only held it, fingertips resting lightly on the edge. A subtle gesture, yet it seemed to shift the air around them. Passengers noticed. Their attention sharpened. David noticed, too. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. It means, she said, that clarity is coming. Whether today or in the next few days. Before he could reply, a second announcement called for pre-boarding of passengers requiring assistance. The gate area grew busier, movement swirling around them as if the airport itself wanted to pull the moment forward. Mia returned, now holding a radio, looking slightly nervous. Captain Langford, the operations manager, asked if you could step aside for a moment before boarding. David frowned. What? We're on schedule. I was just asked to relay the message, Mia said carefully. He looked from Mia to Renee, suspicion darkening his expression. Did you call someone? Is this about earlier? Renee shook her head. I didn't call anyone, but she didn't look surprised. David exhaled hard. The situation was slipping through his fingers. He couldn't understand why. All he knew was that something bigger than a simple disagreement was starting to surface, and he no longer felt in control of it. He stepped toward the operations hallway, but not before glancing back at Renee, this woman who held her ground with such quiet certainty. A certainty he had underestimated. A certainty he might regret underestimating. Marcus followed Captain John Halden down the narrow corridor of Dallas-Fort Worth Regional's Terminal C, his steps echoing against the polished floor. The airport afternoon light cut in long strips through the tall windows, bright enough to show the tension in every line of John's shoulders. He kept glancing back at Evelyn Parker, the black woman John had lectured earlier, loudly and undeservedly, at the gate podium. Evelyn walked a few paces behind them, upright, calm, holding her small leather folder against her chest. Not angry, not flustered, calm in a way that made Marcus' heartbeat race. Something was building. John slowed at the crew lounge door. Let's get this sorted privately, he said, trying for authority but landing closer to strain. Evelyn stopped before crossing the threshold. I'll join you, she said softly. Transparency helps everyone. Marcus felt the air tighten. She wasn't backing down, and she wasn't afraid of him. Inside, the lounge was mostly empty, just the low hum of an ice machine and the distant rumble of rolling suitcases outside. John gestured stiffly toward a table. Evelyn didn't take the offered seat. She simply opened her folder with a smooth practice motion. A pale blue swipe card slid slightly into view. Marcus noticed the detail. Not a passenger badge. Not crew. Something else. A hint. I want to revisit what happened at the gate, Evelyn said. Her tone was steady, each word measured. In your words, Captain Halden, I was holding up operations and sitting in a restricted seat I could not possibly be cleared for. John's jaw worked. I spoke firmly. That's true. But it was protocol. Passengers can't. I never said I was a passenger. John stopped mid-sentence. Another beat of silence. The ice machine clicked, releasing another cube. Marcus watched John's face subtly shift, the first flicker of realization creeping into his eyes. Evelyn continued. When asked, I told you I was here for meetings with leadership. You waved me off. Twice. I was pre-flighting, John muttered defensively. Busy. I hear a dozen stories a day. Evelyn closed the folder halfway, just enough that the blue swipe card slipped forward another inch, catching the light again. Second hint. Marcus swallowed. He knew that kind of card. Or he suspected. Evelyn's gaze held steady on John. There's something you should understand before this goes further. A ripple of tension moved through John's posture. You could have identified yourself more clearly, he snapped, not loud but sharp. You let me believe you were. A problem. Evelyn finished. An inconvenience. Someone beneath your time. John stiffened. The door swung open briefly as a junior flight attendant poked her head in, saw the mood, and backed out with a whispered sorry. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing the room again. Marcus cleared his throat gently. Captain, maybe we should listen. John shot him a glare, but Marcus didn't look away. Something about Evelyn's quiet control made it impossible to ignore. She studied both men. Thank you, Marcus. Listening is all I've wanted since I arrived. Her tone wasn't accusatory. If anything, it carried a sadness that made Marcus shift in his seat. John finally sank into a chair, arms crossed. Fine. Tell me. Evelyn placed the blue swipe card fully atop the folder, but didn't turn it face up. I'm here to evaluate several ongoing crew culture concerns. Not disciplinary angles, training, communication, resource gaps. Things that affect safety and passenger experience. John scoffed. We don't have culture concerns. We have staffing shortages and impossible schedules. And sometimes, Evelyn said gently, people under stress speak in ways they don't intend. But the impact remains. A flush colored John's cheeks. Evelyn didn't push. She simply let the moment sit. Marcus could feel something turning, like a wheel clicking into place. John exhaled slowly. Look, I might have been abrupt, but I treat everyone the same. Evelyn nodded once. And sometimes the same is not fair. The hum of the ice machine filled the pause. John suddenly leaned forward. All right, then. If you're here evaluating us, what exactly is your position? Who sent you? Are you from training? Operations? HR? Evelyn pressed her palm gently atop the folder. We'll discuss that soon enough. It wasn't evasive. It wasn't coy. It was a promise. And it landed heavily. Marcus straightened. She was someone. Evelyn glanced toward the lounge window, watching a jet taxi along the bright tarmac. Captain Halden, I'd like a chance to speak candidly with you. About respect. About safety. About how we represent the company every time we raise our voice, especially in uniform. John's eyes narrowed, defensive walls rising again. And what authority gives you the right to lecture me? Evelyn's hand slipped to the blue swipe card. She turned it over. Not fully, just enough that they saw the embossed crest at the top. Marcus felt his pulse spike. John paled. She covered the card again. We'll finish this conversation once we're in the conference room, she said. Someone is joining us. Who? John asked quietly. My counterpart, she replied. And they were very interested in how your interaction with me began. Marcus inhaled sharply. John blinked slowly, realization dawning. Too late. Evelyn closed her folder. It's time, she said. She walked toward the door. Neither man moved for several seconds. Then Marcus stood. John didn't. Not yet. Because the world he thought he commanded was shifting under his feet. Marcus stood at the edge of the jet bridge, arms stiff at his sides, as if the metal walls themselves were judging the silence. The hum of the terminal carried in, rolling suitcase wheels, muffled announcements, the faint clatter of someone closing a gate door 2 stands down. Evelyn stepped forward, calm, her posture steady, her voice quiet enough that he had to lean in to hear. Captain Hayes, she said, I believe there's something you should know before we continue. Marcus's jaw shifted. If this is about the seating dispute earlier, Ms. Carter, I've already filed my statement. Her eyes didn't flinch. Good. Yours will be one of many. A ripple of uncertainty crossed his face, brief, but visible. The air tightened. Behind her, Grace, the senior flight attendant, hovered with restless hands folded in front of her. She'd witnessed the confrontation earlier, the dismissive tone Marcus had used, the public reprimand, the quiet humiliation Evelyn absorbed without raising her voice. Now Grace watched with growing suspicion. Something was changing. Evelyn reached into her bag. No rush, no drama, only precision. She withdrew a slim black folder and placed it against her palm. The soft click of the latch opening echoed along the empty jet bridge. Marcus's eyes followed it. What is that? Documentation, Evelyn said. The kind you told me I didn't have. She turned the folder so he could see the embossed seal. The airline's corporate crest. Direct. Unmistakable. Marcus blinked. How did you? She lifted the letter from inside. Heavy paper. The signature at the bottom crisp and unmistakable. I was supposed to be introduced next week, she said, but life doesn't always wait for proper scheduling. Marcus stared at the page. The words blurred before reorganizing themselves into a truth he did not want to believe. Evelyn Carter, Executive Director of Flight Operations, National Division, effective today. His breath stalled. Executive? Director? Yes, she said gently. Your new department head. The metal beneath their feet seemed to absorb the shock. Grace gasped softly. A ramp worker passing outside the bridge window paused mid-step, sensing tension though unable to hear a word. Marcus swallowed hard. Why didn't you say anything earlier? Evelyn slid the letter back into the folder with steady intention. Because no one's title should determine the respect they receive. Not on the ground. Not in the sky. She let that settle. Marcus glanced away, color draining from his cheeks. Bits of memory flickered in his eyes, how he'd interrupted her mid-sentence at the gate, how he'd questioned her right to stand in the priority line, how he referred to her as ma'am with that subtle, dismissive edge. Things he considered harmless. Things that had landed with weight. I misread the situation, he murmured. And you? Evelyn nodded. Yes, Captain Hayes. You did. A distant announcement echoed through the terminal. Final boarding for Flight 228 to St. Louis. The normal world kept moving, unaware that a career's axis had just tilted. Evelyn shifted her folder under her arm. This airline is rewriting our leadership expectations, she said. Safety, integrity, and dignity are inseparable. And what happens on the jet bridge matters just as much as what happens in the cockpit. Marcus's throat tightened. I understand. She studied him, not harshly, but with the quiet clarity of someone who had earned every inch of her authority. You have strong reviews, she said. A solid flying record. Many speak well of your technical skill. Hope flickered briefly in his eyes. But skill, she continued, is not the same as character. His shoulders sank. Grace looked away as if intruding on a private reckoning. Evelyn stepped closer, her tone softening. Marcus, I don't believe in throwing people away. I believe in accountability, growth, standards. He lifted his eyes slowly. What happens now? She paused, a single, measured breath, then said, That depends on how you choose to carry this moment forward. Because the next conversation we have will not be on a jet bridge. Marcus felt the weight of it. A promise. A warning. A chance. Evelyn turned toward the terminal, her steps calm and unwavering, Grace following behind her. At the threshold, she glanced back once. Only once. Captain Hayes, she said, I'll see you in my office tomorrow morning. Marcus nodded, though his throat could barely form the motion. The jet bridge door closed behind her with a soft metallic seal. He stood alone in the narrow space, the silence finally catching him. And for the first time all day, Marcus Hayes, the man who always believed he held the highest authority on the aircraft, felt the full impact of discovering he was no longer at the top of the chain. The cabin of the Houston to Denver morning flight had gone so still that even the airflow vents seemed to hush. Captain Derek Lawson stood frozen near the forward galley, his polished shoes anchored to the carpet as if the aircraft itself held him there. Across from him, Dr. Elaine Carter, calm and upright, finished signing the last page the regional operations team had just transmitted to her tablet. The small click of her stylus, sharp final, echoed down the aisle. A few passengers glanced over newspapers or half-closed tablets. Others watched openly now, sensing something important unfolding, though they did not know exactly what. Captain Lawson, Dr. Carter said, her voice even. Let's be clear. I did not come aboard to embarrass you. I came because this route is being evaluated for a new leadership rotation. I needed to see the crew culture for myself. Derek swallowed. Ma'am, I didn't know who you were. That is the point, she replied. Professional respect should not depend on knowing someone's title. Her words landed with a weight heavier than any turbulence the flight had met that morning. A flight attendant, Grace Monroe, mid-40s, steady and attentive, shifted her stance. She had been the one who tried moments earlier to quietly de-escalate Derek's dismissive comments to Dr. Carter in the jet bridge. Now her eyes held a quiet resolve. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands, usually firm and confident when wrapped around the yoke, hung uncertainly at his sides. You said, Dr. Carter continued, her tone controlled yet unmistakably firm, that a passenger like me shouldn't question cockpit decisions. That I should stay in my place. And you said it while looking me directly in the eye. Derek's shoulders sagged a fraction. Ah, I spoke out of frustration. No, she answered gently. You spoke out of assumption. Another quiet fell over the front cabin. A man in seat 1A lowered his coffee cup. An elderly woman in 2C tilted her head, listening. Dr. Carter stepped just slightly closer, professional, not confrontational. Captain, in the next 48 hours, I will be reviewing crew leadership performance. Your name will be on my desk, not because of what happened, but because how you respond now will determine whether this becomes a lesson or a pattern. Derek blinked hard. What do you want me to do? I want you to demonstrate genuine accountability, she said. Starting with your crew. They witnessed your words. They deserve better from someone entrusted with command. Grace inhaled softly, surprised to be included so directly. Derek turned toward her. His voice came out rough but controlled. Grace, I'm sorry. You tried to guide me back to standard protocol, and I brushed it aside. That wasn't fair. Grace gave a small nod, measured, not dismissive. Thank you, Captain. Then Derek faced Dr. Carter. And to you, ma'am. I am sorry. I let irritation override professionalism. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. Not to you, not to anyone. Passengers exchanged quiet glances. A few shifted. Relieved tension was beginning to thaw. Dr. Carter studied him for several heartbeats. Then she tapped her tablet again. Apology accepted. But sincerity means very little without behavioral change. So here's what comes next. Derek braced himself. You will complete the leadership renewal module this month. You will conduct your next 2 pre-flight briefings with your crew jointly, not alone. And she added, you will invite input instead of treating procedures as one-directional commands. He nodded quickly, almost gratefully. Yes, ma'am. I can do that. I expect you will, she answered. For the first time, Derek looked not cornered, but relieved, like a man being handed a rope after drifting too close to a cliff. The interphone buzzed. Grace lifted it, listened, then covered the receiver. Ma'am, the ground operations manager is ready to speak with you once we disembark. Thank you, Grace, Dr. Carter replied. She turned back to Derek. I will meet with them. But for now, I need you to finish this flight without further tension. Can you do that? Yes, he said. And though his voice trembled faintly, it was sincere. I will. She stepped aside so he could return to the cockpit. Just before he reached the door, she added quietly, Captain Lawson, authority isn't diminished by humility. It's strengthened by it. Derek paused, absorbing the words as though they were part of a new flight manual he had never known he needed. He nodded once, deeply, then slipped into the cockpit. Dr. Carter exhaled. Passengers returned to their seats. Grace resumed her safety checks, but her eyes held a new steadiness. The dynamic aboard the flight had shifted completely, and it was only the beginning. The conference room at the regional aviation office felt colder than the hall outside, though the vents barely whispered. Captain Daniel Hayes sat at one end of the long table, his hands flat, fingers stretched as if bracing against an unseen impact. Across from him sat Alicia Ward, still composed, still quiet, her tablet resting like a sealed verdict. A compliance officer, Mark Ellison, cleared his throat. Captain Hayes, we've reviewed the footage, the statements, and the cockpit log. Daniel nodded once. He had not slept. The echo of his own dismissive words he'd said to Alicia without knowing who she was, kept replaying like rough engine static. Ellison continued, your operational record remains strong, but your conduct with a passenger, and then with a senior official you didn't realize you were speaking to, requires immediate corrective action. Alicia didn't look triumphant. Instead, she looked tired of seeing the same patterns, tired of the same explanations. She finally spoke. Captain Hayes, professionalism isn't conditional. It doesn't depend on rank or appearance. It's supposed to withstand stress. Her tone wasn't harsh. That almost made it worse. Daniel swallowed. Ms. Ward, I was wrong. Entirely. And I know an apology can't undo it. There was a pause, long enough that the silence seemed to press against the glass walls. Then Alicia nodded once, crisp. We'll address accountability now, not later. Ellison slid a folder across the table. Here are the formal steps, a temporary grounding for retraining, mandatory bias awareness coursework, and a monitored return to duty. Your seniority stands, but your supervisory privileges will be paused pending review. Each line cut deeper than the last, not because of the penalties themselves, those he expected, but because he knew he had earned every one of them. Daniel breathed out slowly. Understood. Alicia studied him for another beat. A flicker of something, regret, relief, crossed her expression, but vanished quickly. We're also implementing procedural adjustments for crew-passenger interactions, she added. Not because of one incident, but because patterns deserve structural fixes. Daniel exhaled again, softer this time. Thank you for giving me the chance to learn from this rather than ending my career outright. Alicia didn't smile, but her voice eased. People change when they're willing to listen. Show that you can. A faint knock broke the tension. The door opened, and a young scheduling coordinator leaned in. Excuse me, Ms. Ward, media inquiries are coming in faster than expected. The comms draft is ready. Alicia stood. Her posture remained elegant and firm, but there was no triumph in her stride. She turned back to Daniel. One more thing. You'll have the opportunity to address your crew personally once retraining begins. Use that moment wisely. He nodded. I will. Outside the conference room, the hallway buzzed with soft chatter and echoing footsteps. Daniel walked slowly, noticing details he had ignored before. The framed safety awards, the photos of diverse crews, the small plaque honoring retired captains who had mentored younger staff. He had always thought he belonged among them. Now he wasn't so sure. As he reached the lobby, a familiar voice called out, Captain Hayes. He turned. Grace Lawson, a flight attendant who had witnessed part of the earlier conflict, stepped forward. She looked cautious, but not hostile. I heard about the review, she said. Word travels fast. Daniel managed a tired smile. Doesn't surprise me. Grace folded her arms gently. For what it's worth, owning it means something. A lot of people would have denied everything. Daniel nodded. I didn't treat Ms. Ward with the respect she deserved. I didn't treat you with the respect you deserved either. Grace considered this, then nodded. Well, you have work ahead. But work is how people rebuild trust. Her kindness, measured, not sentimental, hit him harder than any reprimand. He watched her walk back toward the stairwell, then stepped outside into the late afternoon light. A mild breeze carried the scent of jet fuel from the tarmac. He used to love that smell. It had meant freedom, command, purpose. Today it felt like a reminder. Even the sky had rules, and he had forgotten some of them. Slowly, he squared his shoulders and headed toward the training wing, not because he wanted to, but because it was the only path forward. Alicia's words echoed again. Show that you can. He intended to. The late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Dallas Regional Airport's administrative wing, tracing long golden stripes across the hallway floor. The hum of distant jet engines rose and faded in slow waves. It had been 2 weeks, 2 difficult, public, humbling weeks since the confrontation on Concourse C. What began as a small moment of disrespect in the boarding line had grown into a day that changed several careers and, unexpectedly, several lives. John Mercer, senior pilot of more than 20 years, stood outside the conference room now, smoothing the wrinkle on his sleeve for the 7th time. His uniform felt heavier today, as if stitched with the weight of everything he had said and everything he wished he had said differently. Through the frosted glass door, he could hear soft voices. A meeting was wrapping up, and he already knew who would be stepping out next. The door cracked open. Evelyn Carter, the newly appointed director of aviation operations, stepped into the hallway. Her navy suit was crisp, her posture steady, her expression calm, but not cold. She paused when she saw John. Captain Mercer, she said, her voice even. He removed his cap. Ms. Carter, thank you for agreeing to see me. She nodded. Let's take a walk. They moved down the corridor together. Evelyn's stride was measured, composed. John kept his hands folded behind him like a cadet awaiting review. A plane roared somewhere beyond the glass. Evelyn spoke first. I read your statement, she said, and your follow-up letter to the cabin crew. John inhaled. I meant every word. I handled myself poorly. I let my assumptions speak before I did. And I'm sorry, a beat. Truly. Evelyn's eyes softened just a fraction. Accountability matters, Captain. Most people resist it. You walked toward it. They reached the viewing window over the tarmac. The sky glowed orange as another aircraft taxied toward the gate. Jean looked at his reflection in the glass, then at hers. "I've been flying since I was 22, he said quietly, "and I thought that gave me the right to act like the sky belonged to me. But you showed me it doesn't belong to any one of us." Evelyn folded her hands. "It belongs to everyone who steps on a plane. Everyone working behind the scenes. Everyone who trusts us." A slow breath left him. "I'd like to do better." Genuinely. Not just in a statement. Evelyn tilted her head. "How so?" He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and revealed a small notebook, its cover worn from long use. "I've been writing something. Plans. Ideas. I can submit them formally, but I wanted to show you first." He offered the notebook. Evelyn accepted it but didn't open it yet. "What's inside?" "A proposal for a cross-department program. Pilots, crew, ground staff, bias awareness, leadership humility training, and mentorship, pairing senior pilots with new administrators for a few hours a month." He paused. "I'd volunteer to be the first one assigned." Evelyn absorbed that, her expression unreadable. "This wasn't assigned to you," she said finally. "No," he admitted. "But maybe it should have been years ago." The corners of Evelyn's mouth lifted, small, but unmistakably real. "Let's sit." They settled onto a bench facing the window. Evelyn opened the notebook now, flipping through neat bullet points, sketches of flowcharts, highlighted phrases like shared responsibility and surface before flight. "This is thoughtful," she said. "And practical." Jean looked at his hands. "Ms. Carter, I know you don't owe me anything. You don't even have to consider this." "I do," she said, "because the system needs more than apologies. It needs reform. Cultural, not just procedural." He nodded, relief easing some of the tightness in his shoulders. Evelyn closed the notebook and handed it back. "Let's refine it with the training division. If the board approves, we'll pilot the program next quarter." Jean blinked. "You're accepting it?" "I'm accepting the start," she said. "Progress takes more than paperwork." He exhaled, a long, heavy breath that seemed to leave room for something better to enter. "Thank you," he murmured. "Captain Mercer," she added, "one more thing." He faced her. "You've earned my respect these last 2 weeks." The words hit harder than he expected. "I'm honored," he said. And she continued, "I believe respect becomes real when it turns into habit." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll make it one." They stood. The glow outside deepened toward dusk. Later that week, the training auditorium smelled faintly of coffee and new carpet. Dozens of employees, pilots, gate agents, flight attendants, maintenance techs, took their seats. A few recognized Evelyn at the front and straightened in their chairs. A few recognized John and whispered to their coworkers, surprised to see him there without taking the podium. Evelyn stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We're starting something new today. Something designed to strengthen trust across every branch of airport operations. Our goal is simple, respect in motion." She nodded toward John. "Captain Mercer will be participating as well. Not leading. Participating." A few murmurs rippled across the room, respectful, curious. John raised his chin and offered a small nod to the crowd. No grandstanding. No rehearsed speech. Just presence. Evelyn continued, "This program won't fix everything overnight. But every system changes the moment the people inside it decide to change themselves." She scanned the room, found John again, then looked back to the staff. "Let's begin." A quiet aftermath. In the following days, things shifted, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. A young baggage supervisor reported that a veteran pilot had asked her opinion on logistical timing. She nearly cried from surprise. A gate agent said someone from the cockpit asked how her day was going, not as courtesy, but with genuine interest. And John, once whispered about for the wrong reasons, was now whispered about for the right ones. He didn't correct anyone's narratives. He didn't promote his efforts. He simply showed up to every training, full uniform, notebook in hand, listening more than speaking. Evelyn noticed. She also noticed the way he held the door open for staff, the way he thanked ground crew members by name, the way he paused before stepping into the cockpit, as if remembering that authority was no longer something he took for granted. She respected the steadiness of his effort. One conversation more. A week later, Evelyn found John standing near the passenger tunnels, watching a crew prep for boarding. "Captain," she greeted. He turned. "Director. Leaving for Denver soon?" "Yes," he said. "Pre-flight starts in 15. Mind if I walk you there?" "Not at all." They walked down the quiet corridor together. "John," she said gently, "you made changes. Real ones. I don't want you to think I haven't seen the effort." "I appreciate that," he said. "But I also want to be clear," she continued. "Growth isn't a finish line. It's maintenance. Some days will test you." He nodded. "I know. And I intend to keep showing up." She studied his profile, creased with age, humility, and a new sense of purpose. "You're a good pilot," she said. "Now you're becoming a better leader." He halted. "That means a lot." Evelyn extended her hand. He shook it, steady and sincere. "Have a safe flight, Captain Mercer." He smiled. "I'll fly it, right?" As John entered the jet bridge, he looked back once. Evelyn stood under the soft overhead lights, clipboard in hand, posture strong and composed. For a moment, he remembered the first day he met her, how he had misjudged her, minimized her, spoken to her as if authority were written in epaulets rather than earned through competence. He carried that memory now not as shame, but as direction. He stepped onto the aircraft with quiet resolve. Back in her office, Evelyn closed the door and exhaled. The day had been long, but meaningful. She opened her laptop, pulled up the training program draft, and added a single line to the top. "Respect is not a title. It is a choice." She sat back, letting the words settle, then smiled, small, private, hopeful. Tomorrow, more work awaited. But tonight, she allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. Progress wasn't loud. It was steady. And this time, it had begun in the very place where it once broke. 3 months after the upheaval in Dallas, the early light over Love Field Airport looked softer, almost forgiving. Sunlight streamed across the glass atrium, glinting off rolling suitcases and the polished floor. The season had turned warmer, the air carrying that faint mineral scent of Texas summer after a brief morning rain. Evelyn Carter, now officially the vice president of flight operations, walked the concourse with a quiet steadiness. She wore a simple navy dress and carried only one thing in her hand, a slim silver pilot's badge, the upgraded version she had introduced as her first system-wide reform. It shimmered as she rolled it lightly between her fingers, a soft metallic click that had become her private reminder of what dignity required: presence, patience, and proof. Every step felt different now. Not triumphant, just clearer. Near gate 18, she paused. The space had changed since that day. A new sign hung on the wall. "Respect is standard procedure for all passengers, for all crew." Beneath it, a small plaque noted the updated training program she'd authored. Nothing grand. Nothing with her name front and center. Just a line that mattered: policy must match practice. A voice behind her spoke carefully. "Ms. Carter." "Good morning." Evelyn turned. Captain Ray Morrow stood there, neater than the last time she saw him, posture straighter, uniform crisp. His age showed a little more around the eyes, but the defensiveness was gone. In its place, something quieter, something that took effort. "Good morning, Captain," she said. He nodded once, respectful. "I wanted to say again that I appreciate the second chance. And the training sessions. They help." He swallowed, the words steady but humble. "I didn't realize how much I needed to unlearn." Evelyn held his gaze. "Growth is hard work," she answered. "Thank you for doing it." Passengers walked past them. Ordinary travelers beginning ordinary days. A child laughed near a window. A boarding call chimed overhead. Life moving, unbothered, unknowing of the upheaval that had taken place in this very corridor. Ray cleared his throat. "If you ever need a volunteer mentor for new pilots, I'd like to help. Might keep me honest." Evelyn allowed a small smile. "I'll keep that in mind." They exchanged a professional nod. Ray stepped away toward his gate, shoulders more grounded than the man she once confronted. Not perfect, not redefined, just progressing. And that, she believed, counted. Evelyn continued down the concourse toward the observation windows. The morning's first departure lifted into the sky, its engines a steady hum. She watched it climb, slow then rising, the way change usually happened, incremental, resisted, but possible. Mom. Her daughter, Grace, approached with 2 coffees in hand. She was home from college for a long weekend, still wearing her internship badge clipped proudly to her bag. I brought the cinnamon one you like, Grace said, pressing the warm cup into Evelyn's palm. Thank you, Evelyn replied, savoring the heat through the cardboard. You didn't have to come all the way to meet me. Grace shrugged. I wanted to see where it all happened. Besides, she grinned. You told me stories, but the place feels different in person. They walked together toward the quieter end of the terminal. Evelyn let the calm settle. For months, she had managed meetings, negotiated policy drafts, listened to crews, and revised procedures, not from anger, but from purpose. The work was far from finished, and she had no illusions about that. But it was moving forward. As they reached the end windows, Grace leaned her head briefly on her mother's shoulder. I'm proud of you, she said simply. Evelyn didn't speak for a moment. She traced her finger over the silver pilot's badge once more, letting the cool metal ground her. I'm proud of all of us, she finally answered. Anyone who chooses to do better, no matter how late, is worth the effort. A final boarding chime sounded behind them. The sun lifted fully over the horizon, washing the plains in a clean, bright gold. Evelyn slipped the badge into her pocket, letting its quiet weight remind her of both the hard path behind and the steady path ahead. Ready to go? She asked. Grace smiled. Always. They walked toward the exit, mother and daughter steady and unhurried, leaving the gate area behind as another plane rose into the morning sky. Andy, thanks for watching.